The Astral Confederation's Grand Chamber hadn't changed in 3 centuries, all sweeping crystal arches and floating platforms of pure light. That was precisely the problem, thought Ambassador Sarah Chen as she adjusted her formal diplomatic sash. The chamber, like its occupants, remained frozen in time, convinced of their own perfection. High above, representatives from 200 species filled the tiered seating, their biosignature halos glowing in a rainbow of colors. Most barely glanced at the humans standing at the speaking platform. After all, why pay attention to a species that had achieved faster-than-light travel barely 50 years ago? The Human Cooperative, Sarah began, her voice steady despite the growing knot in her stomach, formally protests the Confederation's unilateral seizure of the Proxima mining belt. These actions violate not only standing treaties but basic principles of point of order. The crystalline chimes of First Speaker Vilax cut through her words. His translucent form shimmered with what passed for amusement among the Lightrainy. The human representative appears confused about Confederation protocol. Junior species must have their statements vetted by their assigned mentors before addressing the full chamber. Scattered laughter rippled through the chamber. Sarah's hands tightened imperceptibly on the podium. 50 years of this, of being patronized, dismissed, treated like children who had wandered into the adults' room. And for 50 years, humanity had smiled, nodded, and kept their true capabilities hidden. With respect, First Speaker, Sarah continued, ignoring the interruption. The situation in Proxima requires immediate attention. The Confederation's mining corporations have begun operations without proper environmental surveys. The asteroid belt's unique quantum resonance patterns make standard extraction methods potentially catastrophic. The human representative, came another voice, this one belonging to Trade Minister Kex of the Mercian, appears to be questioning the technical expertise of species that have been conducting stellar mining operations since before her ancestors discovered fire. More laughter. Sarah pulled up a holographic display showing the complex quantum calculations her team had prepared. If you'll examine the data, you'll see that the resonance cascades could trigger a chain reaction that would. The display vanished with a gesture from Vilax. The Confederation appreciates humanity's enthusiastic participation in galactic affairs. However, these matters are best left to more experienced species. Your concern is noted. This matter is closed. Sarah felt a familiar message pulse through her neural implant, hidden, like so much of humanity's true technology, from Confederation scans. The quantum readings from Proxima were getting worse. They had maybe 3 days before the Confederation's mining operations triggered a disaster that could rip apart half the asteroid belt. She had one last card to play. First Speaker, the Human Cooperative formally invokes Article 7 of the Junior Species Protection Act. The chamber fell silent. In 3 centuries, no species had ever invoked Article 7, the right of a junior species to challenge their mentors before the full council if they believed themselves to be in existential danger. Vilax's crystalline form flickered with barely contained anger. You dare. We dare, Sarah said quietly. Because we must. The data will show that the Confederation's actions place not only human colonies but multiple species outposts at risk. Under Article 7, you must allow a full hearing within 3 standard days. The chamber erupted in outrage. Sarah stood calmly as the chaos swirled around her, another message pulsing through her implant. The quantum stabilizers humanity had secretly installed throughout the belt were holding, barely. They just needed time to evacuate the most vulnerable colonies without revealing their technological edge. Very well, Vilax finally said, his tone dripping with disdain. The Council will convene in 3 days to humor humanity's concerns, though I remind the representative that false invocation of Article 7 carries severe penalties for junior species. Sarah bowed slightly. We understand completely, First Speaker. As she turned to leave the chamber, she caught the eye of the Mercian Trade Minister, who was still chuckling at the presumption of these upstart humans. What none of them knew What humanity had hidden for 50 years was that their quantum stabilizer technology was just the tip of the iceberg. In their arrogance, the Confederation had never asked why humans seemed so unconcerned about being treated as primitives. They had never wondered if humanity's patience might be a choice rather than a necessity. In 3 days, they would begin to understand. Sarah only hoped they would listen before it was too late for everyone. The quantum cascade began exactly as humanity's models had predicted. Sarah watched from the observation deck of the Terran diplomatic vessel Athena as the first ripples of purple energy danced across the Proxima belt. Confederation mining ships continued their work, their crews completely unaware of the disaster they were about to trigger. "Final evacuation numbers?" she asked, her neural implant connecting her directly to Earth Command, while maintaining the appearance of speaking into a primitive communicator for any watching Confederation sensors. 98% of human personnel cleared from the danger zone. Came the silent response through her implant. Most under cover of routine crew rotations. The Confederation hasn't noticed anything unusual. The remaining 2% were the skeleton crews maintaining the quantum stabilizers. Volunteers who understood the risks but refused to leave until the last possible moment. If the Confederation had just listened 3 days ago. A proximity alert flashed. A Lydrani diplomatic cruiser was approaching, its crystalline hull refracting the light of Proxima Centauri. Right on schedule. Human Representative Chen. First Speaker Vilax's hologram materialized in the observation deck, still managing to look down at her despite being a projection. "The Council has assembled to address your concerns, though I must note that examining an active mining operation from a distance of 0.3 light minutes violates several regulations regarding junior species vessels." Sarah turned to face the hologram, noting the dozen other council members manifesting around the deck. "First Speaker, I'm afraid we don't have time for." The first stabilizer failed. A massive pulse of quantum energy erupted from asteroid mining site 17, tearing apart 3 Confederation drilling platforms in an instant. The energy cascade painted the observation deck in shifting purple light as reality itself seemed to twist. "What is happening?" Vilax demanded, his crystalline form flickering with alarm. "What have you primitives done?" "Exactly what we warned you would happen," Sarah replied calmly, even as her implant fed her a stream of data from the failing stabilizer network. The quantum resonance patterns. Impossible. Trade Minister Kex cut in. "Our sensors detected no unusual quantum activity before beginning operations." "Your sensors," Sarah said quietly, "see what they expect to see, just like your diplomats." Another stabilizer failed. A chunk of asteroid the size of a small moon began to break apart, its matter caught in the quantum cascade. Sarah watched the Confederation mining ships frantically trying to escape, their supposedly advanced drives struggling against the growing gravitational distortions. "All Confederation vessels," she broadcast on an open channel, "clear the following coordinates immediately." A series of navigation points appeared on all ships' displays. "These are the only safe corridors out of the cascade zone." "You dare to give orders?" Vilax began, but was cut off as a third stabilizer failed, sending a wave of quantum energy that made even the holograms flicker. "Those coordinates," Sarah continued as if she hadn't heard him, "are calculated based on technology you believed we couldn't possibly possess. You can continue to deny reality, or you can save your people. Choose quickly." Through her implant, she watched as the Confederation fleet hesitated. Pride warred with survival instinct as the quantum cascade grew stronger. Finally, one ship turned toward the indicated corridor. Then another. Soon, the entire fleet was following humanity's escape route. All except one Lydrani mining vessel, its crystalline hull already fracturing under the quantum stress. Its engines were damaged, leaving it trapped in the growing chaos. "Athena," Sarah subvocalized through her implant. "Execute rescue protocol Sierra 7. The diplomatic vessel's outer hull shifted, metamorphic alloys flowing like liquid metal to reveal technology that shouldn't have existed on a junior species ship. A quantum tether, technology the Confederation believed was centuries beyond human capability, lanced out and wrapped around the stricken Light Rainy ship. The observation deck holograms stared in shocked silence as the Athena pulled the massive mining vessel to safety, its primitive hull somehow completely unaffected by the quantum cascade. How? Vilax's hologram flickered, his crystalline form shifting through patterns Sarah's xenolinguists identified as extreme distress. How is this possible? 3 days, Sarah replied, watching as the last stabilizer failed and the quantum cascade reached critical mass. We gave you 3 days to listen, to look past your assumptions, to consider that maybe, just maybe, the primitive humans knew what we were talking about. The Proxima mining belt erupted in a spectacular display of quantum energy, decades of Confederation mining operations torn apart in minutes. But thanks to humanity's secret evacuation and the escape corridors they had calculated, not a single life was lost. The human cooperative, Sarah turned to address the stunned council holograms, requests an emergency session of the full council. This time, I suggest you listen carefully to what we have to say. The holograms vanish one by one, leaving Sarah alone on the observation deck. Through her implant, she received confirmation that the disaster had been contained exactly as planned. Humanity's message had been sent. The question now was whether the Confederation would finally hear it. The emergency council session was held in darkness. The Confederation's Grand Crystal Chamber, normally awash in artificial starlight, was dim save for the soft glow of representative halos. It wasn't a technical malfunction, it was tradition, a signal that the council faced a crisis that threatened its very foundations. Sarah stood at the center of it all, her simple diplomatic uniform a stark contrast to the ornate garb of the council members. The quantum cascade had been contained 6 hours ago, but its political shockwaves were just beginning to spread. Explain. First Speaker Vilax demanded, his crystalline form pulsing with barely contained energy, how a junior species concealed quantum manipulation technology that our own scientists believe impossible. The same way, Sarah replied, that we've concealed everything else, by letting you see exactly what you expected to see. With a gesture, she activated her neural implant. The chamber's holographic systems, which moments ago had rejected her access as a junior species representative, responded instantly. The darkness above erupted into a massive display of data streams, technical readouts, and surveillance feeds. For 50 years, she continued, you've watched us struggle with primitive fusion drives while we perfected quantum folding technology. You've patronized our crude attempts at neural interfaces while we developed direct consciousness linking. You've dismissed our mining operations as inefficient while we learned to manipulate the quantum fabric of space itself. The council chamber erupted in shocked murmurs as the scope of humanity's deception became clear. Security feeds showed human ships shedding their primitive exteriors like snake skins, revealing sleek vessels of impossible design. Research stations previously dismissed as basic outposts transformed into cutting-edge laboratories. Impossible. Trade Minister Keck sputtered, his fur standing on end. Our monitoring systems were designed to detect known technologies, Sarah interrupted, not to imagine new ones. When your sensors found no quantum activity in the Proxima belt, did any of you consider that we might have developed ways to manipulate quantum fields that your systems couldn't detect? She gestured again, and the displays shifted to show the network of quantum stabilizers that had contained the cascade. We didn't just predict the disaster, we spent years preparing for it. Every mining accident, every primitive failure on our part, was carefully calculated to maintain the illusion you so desperately wanted to believe. But why? A Drachnid representative's wings rustled nervously. Why maintain such an elaborate deception? Because you gave us no choice. Sarah's voice carried a weight of 50 years of accumulated frustration. From our first contact, you treated us as children to be guided, resources to be exploited. Any attempt to demonstrate advanced capabilities was dismissed or suppressed. So we adapted. We learned. We watched. New images appeared. Records of hundreds of council sessions where human representatives were mocked, dismissed, or ignored. Each incident annotated with the technological breakthroughs humanity had achieved while playing the role of humble students. The quantum stabilizers that saved your mining fleet today. We developed those 5 years ago, after watching your corporations cut corners on safety protocols. The metamorphic hull technology that let us rescue your stranded ship. A direct response to seeing how you treated primitive vessels in distress. The chamber had fallen completely silent. Even the usual background hum of environmental systems seemed muted, as if the very building was holding its breath. Humanity's patience, Sarah continued, her voice echoing in the stillness, was never about weakness. It was about responsibility. We could have revealed ourselves at any time. We could have demanded equal status, forced technological exchanges, or simply taken what we wanted. Instead, we chose to watch and wait, hoping the Confederation would eventually see past its own prejudices. She paused, looking up at the assembled representatives. That time has passed. The Proxima incident proves that your willful blindness has become actively dangerous, not just to us, but to everyone in Confederation space. Are you threatening this council? Vilax's voice carried a tremor that had never been heard from a first speaker before. No, Sarah replied softly. We're offering to help you change it. Because what happened in Proxima wasn't just a quantum cascade. It was a symptom of a system that values hierarchy over innovation, tradition over truth, and appearance over reality. The displays shifted one final time, showing a detailed proposal for reforming the Confederation structure. One that would eliminate the distinction between senior and junior species. One that would create genuine collaborative research initiatives. One that humanity had spent 50 years perfecting, watching and learning from every mistake the current system made. The choice, Sarah concluded, is yours. But remember, now you know what humanity is truly capable of. The only question is whether we move forward as partners, or... She let the sentence hang unfinished in the darkness of the chamber. She didn't need to complete it. The Confederation's greatest nightmare had just come true. The primitives they'd been patronizing weren't primitive at all. And they had been taking notes. 3 standard days after the Proxima incident, the Confederation's military high command gathered in their secure facility deep within the Arcturus Nebula. The massive war room, designed to coordinate fleets across thousands of light years, now focused on a single holographic display, a complete analysis of known human space. Fleet Admiral Krasful, his insectoid form radiating stress pheromones, watched the display refresh with yet another revelation. 6 hours ago, we discovered that what we thought was a primitive solar observation post near Sirius is actually a quantum communications hub. Our entire strategic map of human space is worthless. Worse than worthless. General Yix of the Drachnid Intelligence Division added, her wings folded tightly against her back. It's exactly what they wanted us to see. Every security assessment, every strategic analysis we've made about human capabilities in the last 50 years. She clicked her mandibles in frustration. We've been writing fiction. The display shifted to show the Athena, the supposedly primitive diplomatic vessel that had revealed technology beyond anything in the Confederation's arsenal. As they watched, the ship's metamorphic hull rippled, its entire structure rearranging itself at the molecular level. Their technological edge is even greater than we first thought. A Lydrani scientist reported, her crystalline form vibrating with nervous energy. The quantum manipulation technologies they demonstrated in Proxima, that's not their cutting edge. That's what they're willing to show us. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. For 50 years, they had built their military doctrine around the assumption that humanity was centuries behind them. Now they had to face the possibility that it was the other way around. They must have a weakness, Krasful insisted. No species can advance this rapidly without. That's exactly the kind of thinking that got us here. A new voice cut in. Ambassador Lix of the Meridian Consensus stepped forward, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing with intensity. "We're still trying to find ways to maintain our supposed superiority instead of asking the obvious question. Why didn't they use this technology against us?" The display shifted again, showing footage from 100 different encounters over the years. Humans smiling politely through insults. Human ships accepting degrading inspections without complaint. Human colonies accepting exploitative trade terms without resistance. "Look at their behavior pattern," Lix continued. "Every time we push them, they have the capability to push back. Hard. Instead, they chose to absorb the insult, gather information, and prepare contingencies. Their restraint wasn't about fear. It was about responsibility." Responsibility. Krasthul's antennae twitched skeptically. "They developed quantum stabilizers to protect us from our own mining practices. Their metamorphic hull technology was first revealed, saving one of our ships. Even their proposal for reforming the Confederation." Lix gestured, and the display showed Sarah Chen's detailed plans. "It's not about dominance. It's about genuine collaboration." General Yix studied the proposal with professional interest. "They've identified systemic weaknesses we didn't even know we had. The hierarchical structure that we thought was our strength. They've documented exactly how it stifles innovation and creates dangerous blind spots, like dismissing any technology we didn't develop ourselves," the Lydrani scientist added quietly. A subtle shift rippled through the room as the assembled military leaders began to see the pattern. Humanity hadn't just hidden their capabilities. They had used their position as a junior species to study the Confederation's weaknesses, not for conquest, but for reform. "There's something else," Lix said, her bioluminescence dimming to a serious pulse. "We're not the only ones who saw what happened at Proxima. Every species in the galaxy now knows that the Confederation's hierarchical structure is fundamentally flawed. If we resist these reforms..." She left the thought unfinished. The display shifted one final time, showing a real-time map of diplomatic communications across the galaxy. Dozens of species, many of them also relegated to junior status, were reaching out to human diplomatic channels, not with threats or demands, but with proposals for collaboration, cultural exchange, and mutual development. "We're facing a choice," Lix concluded. "We can resist this change and prove that we've learned nothing, or we can admit that maybe, just maybe, the humans saw something we missed. That true strength isn't about dominance, but about the wisdom to know when not to use your power." Admiral Krasthul stared at the display for a long moment, his compound eyes reflecting the shifting lights. Finally, he said what everyone in the room had begun to realize. Perhaps it's time we stopped trying to be their teachers and learned how to be their students instead." The tension in the room began to dissolve as, one by one, the military leaders of the Confederation came to terms with their new reality. They had spent 50 years believing they were guiding a primitive species, only to discover that humanity had been quietly leading them toward a better way all along. The question now was whether they would have the wisdom to follow. 1 year after the Proxima incident, the Grand Chamber of the Confederation looked nothing like its former self. The tiered seating that had once physically separated senior and junior species was gone, replaced by a circular arrangement where all representatives sat at the same level. The crystal arches remained, but now they were interwoven with streams of quantum data, human technology working in harmony with Confederation aesthetics. Sarah Chen stood at her podium, no longer in the supplicant's position, but as the elected head of the newly formed Interstellar Development Council. The same representatives who had once dismissed her now waited attentively for her to speak. "The first year of the Reformation," she began, "has exceeded even our most optimistic projections. The dissolution of the species hierarchy has unleashed a wave of innovation and collaboration unprecedented in galactic history." The chamber's holographic display showed the statistics. Research breakthroughs had increased by 300%. Trade efficiency had improved by 275%. Most importantly, Incidents of interspecies conflict had dropped by 80%. But numbers tell only part of the story. Sarah continued. The real change can be seen in how we approach our differences. She gestured, and the display shifted to show a recent crisis in the sickness sector. A previously unknown quantum phenomenon had threatened several colony worlds. Under the old system, the Confederation would have evacuated the senior species first, leaving the others to fend for themselves. Instead, ships from 12 different species had coordinated their response, combining technologies in ways that would have been impossible under the old hierarchical structure. Human quantum manipulation working with light-Rani crystal matrices, powered by Drachnid bioengineering, guided by meridian sensory networks. Not a single life was lost. This, Sarah said softly, is what we waited 50 years to see. Not just the sharing of technology, but the understanding that true advancement comes from collaboration, not competition. Former first speaker Vilax, now serving as a regular representative, shifted his crystalline form in what humans had learned was a gesture of agreement. We thought we were teaching humanity how to join galactic civilization, he admitted. Instead, you were teaching us how to build a better one. But not through force, Sarah emphasized. If humanity had simply revealed our technological superiority and demanded change, we would have replaced one hierarchy with another. Real change had to come from understanding, not fear. The display showed hundreds of joint projects now underway across the galaxy. Species that had once competed now worked together, each contributing their unique perspectives and capabilities. The Confederation's rigid structure had been replaced by a flexible network of cooperative initiatives. There are still challenges ahead, Sarah acknowledged. Change of this magnitude doesn't come without resistance. Some still cling to the old ways, believing that power must be hoarded rather than shared. But even as she spoke, the display showed the declining influence of those who resisted change. The success of the reformed systems was becoming impossible to ignore. Species that had been relegated to the margins of galactic society were now making contributions that benefited everyone. Humanity's greatest strength, Sarah continued, was never our technology. It was our ability to imagine a better way. We spent 50 years watching the Confederation, not to find its weaknesses, but to understand how it could be improved. We played the role of students while preparing to be teachers, not because we sought power, but because we sought progress. The chamber was silent, but it was no longer the tense silence of political maneuvering. It was the quiet of deep understanding, of species who had learned that true strength comes from lifting others up, not holding them down. 1 year ago, Sarah concluded, we stood in this chamber and offered a choice between partnership and confrontation. Today, we stand here as proof that when species choose to work together, there are no limits to what we can achieve. As she finished speaking, the chamber's quantum data streams pulsed with messages of agreement from across the galaxy. The display showed new applications for membership in the reformed Confederation, arriving from previously isolated species. They were drawn not by the promise of power or technology, but by the vision of a galaxy where every voice was heard, every contribution valued. In the end, humanity's greatest victory hadn't come from revealing their hidden strength. It had come from showing the galaxy a better way to use it. As Sarah left the podium, she received a message through her neural implant from Earth Command. Mission accomplished. She smiled, looking out at the chamber where former enemies now worked as colleagues, where innovation flourished without fear, and where the future was being built on cooperation rather than competition. No, she replied silently. Not accomplished, just beginning. Because the true test of any civilization isn't in achieving change, but in maintaining it. Humanity had spent 50 years proving they could outsmart the galaxy. Now came the real challenge, helping to build something that would last for centuries to come. And for that, they would need every species working together, not as seniors and juniors, not as teachers and students, but as equals in the greatest collaborative effort the galaxy had ever seen. The patience of humanity had finally paid off, not in dominance, but in progress. And that was a victory worth waiting for.